Hello, my name is Will, and today we will be talking about privacy policies and what they mean to you as the user of an online service. Privacy policies serve their purpose by means of letting users know what data is being collected, how the data is collected, why it's collected in the first place, how it's being used, who has access to your information, and finally, what choices you have in regards to your data. Before we dive straight into reviewing a privacy policy from the popular social media platform Twitter, I would like you to think about this. Have you ever actually read and understood the privacy policy of your favorite social media platform? If you answered no to that question, I suggest you continue watching this video so that you can have a better understanding of what you're signing up to when it comes to free online services and social media platforms. To begin, you may have seen the words privacy policy, terms of use, or cookies in the footer of a website. Similar to these examples from Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I would suggest taking a look at these documents as they outline the rights you have as a user on their respective platform. Our focus today is really only about privacy policies, so let's review Twitter's stance on data collection, usage, and rights. Just a disclaimer, this video was recorded in March of 2021, and by the time you may be viewing this, the Twitter privacy policy may have been updated. It's important to understand that opting into a privacy policy can be as easy as using the service after an update was made, just to that privacy policy, but companies, however, are required to disclose updates to users when changing privacy policies and other terms. In section 1.1, this document shows that a user is able to view content on Twitter without the need to create an account. However, access to some profiles may be limited because profiles can be set to private, meaning a registered user must be required to follow that user before being able to view their activities or tweets. To register an account on Twitter, users must provide some basic information like a display name, a password, an email, or a phone number. Keep in mind that when providing a phone number or email address, this gives Twitter the right to store that information into a database for future use. Section 1.2 outlines your publicly available information on their platform. This includes the content in a user's biography, time zone, and language. Twitter also collects information from the device you use to access Twitter, and further reading shows that when a user interacts with somebody's tweet by means of like a retweet, a reply, or like, it is recorded into a database and publicly available. This may not sound like a bad thing, but this could lead to some terrifying invasion of privacy. For example, creating a tweet on vacation could unintentionally lead to home burglaries. Though that may be an extreme example, people should definitely understand the risks of generating online content and what is available for everyone to see. Twitter mentions this a bit further down and says to think carefully about what is made public. You never know when your tweet could show up on national television or be retweeted in front of millions of people. Lastly, in section 1.2, Twitter states that your information can be accessed via API protocols by third-party applications. This practice is protected by compliance guidelines, but that doesn't always stop shady actors from accessing public tweets and selling that information to other companies. Section 1.3 explains the usage of a user's email address or phone number for login authentication, notifications of services, and personalization. Not surprisingly, this includes using your email or phone number for advertising purposes. By providing a phone number to Twitter, this gives them the power to send text messages directly to you. It's important to note that your country may differ in regulations regarding to using contact information for advertising, but this section states that Twitter can use your phone number or email address to market to you, and this ability is actually extended to third-party services and applications. If your settings allow it, people who have your email address or phone number saved in their address book can easily find your account. Likewise, you can actually choose to upload your address book, whether that be from a mobile device or laptop, to Twitter and connect with other people you already know who might already have an account. Keep in mind, uploading your address book provides Twitter with a lot of information about your contacts, like first and last name, phone number, or email address. This can also include a nickname. If you use a nickname for your friend and you have their phone number saved, it'll also include that nickname instead of their first and last name. Later, Twitter can easily use these address books to compare that information and map out an incredible framework of nicknames, emails, and phone numbers for all users that opt into this option. Lastly, in this section, Twitter lets users know if they choose to contact Twitter via email, that the content of the email is stored in order to respond to that specific inquiry. The next section, 1.4, provides users with information about direct messaging and non-public communications. Direct messages can be used to create a conversation with someone else in a non-public space. These messages are stored and processed by Twitter to scan for malicious content, shorten links, and detect spam. They also kind of, I guess, take a look at the images and just analyze them to make sure that there's no prohibited images and no other abuse within the direct messaging platform there. When a user deletes a direct message, it's still available for the other recipients in that message, and it may have already been copied or shared. In addition to this, Twitter logs information about who and when you communicate with in direct messages. And that helps them improve in an analytical view their services and Twitter in general. An important point in this section is that Twitter themselves do not share the content in the direct messages for their use or third-party use, but they do log the communication with this and just see, who's talking to who when. In sections 1.5, it's a short section. It covers very briefly the information provided for payment on their platform, and it just includes, credit and debit card number, expiration date, CVV code, and a billing address. And that's just in sense when it comes to purchasing advertising or other offerings as part of their services. The last section in this element, section 1.6, covers a few points about controlling your information that you have given to Twitter and who can see your content. In this section of the user settings called privacy and safety settings, you can decide whether or not your tweets are publicly available or if it requires that you have followers and you approve those followers. You can also choose whether or not other followers are able to tag you in a photo or other media on Twitter, or if you're able to receive direct communication from everyone or just your followers. That would be direct messages. You're also able to stop allowing Twitter to use your email or phone number to help others find you, and to upload or store your address book. Lastly, users are given the option to block or mute other Twitter accounts. The next part of Twitter's privacy policy is all about the additional information that they collect about the users. And in section 2.1, it talks about location services. When signing up for an account with their platform and every time you access Twitter, your IP address and device settings are shared with the company to provide further services. The user may change these settings at any time, but location information can be extremely precise using your cell phone's geolocation. This data is often used to provide more relevant content, based on where you have accessed Twitter from, whether it be on your mobile phone or desktop. It uses your IP address and can pretty much give you local advertisements for restaurants, events, or services. But we'll move on to the next section, section 2.2, and that kind of explains how Twitter tracks users based on the links that they've clicked. When clicking on a link or an advertisement on Twitter, this action is logged into a database, and it can be shared with third parties kind of to track their advertising usage and advertising demographics. Ad services behind these links can also obtain web browser cookies or identifiers from your device and your IP address as well. Speaking of cookies, section 2.3 covers everything you need to really know about Twitter's cookie policy. Essentially what cookies are, they're files that are placed on your device, either your computer, smartphone, or tablet, which are typically used to store session information. That's basically so that a user doesn't have to keep on logging into the service every time they visit the website. But cookies are also used for personalized recommendations and advertisements. While it's not particular to Twitter themselves, companies in e-commerce use cookies to help sell more goods to customers by saving items in a cart or recommending other products based on what they have saved in their cart. From further reading on Twitter's rules and policies, they state that the use of cookies and pixels is for authentication and security, preferences, analytics and research, personalized content, advertising, and finally, they use cookies to bring personalization across devices. Essentially what that means is if you were to take your phone, not even on Twitter itself, but if you were just to search anything about sports, whether it be a sports website, anything like that, if you come back to your laptop later on in the day, you may receive a advertisement to visit a sports website. Twitter does not support the do not track browser option available on most browsers today. This is because the data available on your machine is extremely valuable and they want to take use of that and not respect the non-protocol do not track option on browsers nowadays. Section 2.4 covers what Twitter calls log data, but essentially log data is just a compilation of every action performed on their platform. And if there's no account to link that action to, the information is tied to an entity via device fingerprinting. Twitter makes these assumptions from actions made on their websites to determine users' age, interests, and language, which are later used to personalize further advertisements and content. Because Twitter can be embedded into other websites, whether to show a specific tweet or simply a button to share content onto their platform, Section 2.5 explains further collection of log data via third-party websites. This information, however, is not associated with a specific user and is intended to understand the services they provide on a broader scale. This data is actually deleted before 30 days since the data was collected first. Section 2.3 talks about advertising and ad partners. Like most free services, Twitter makes a good portion of their revenue from advertising. By this point in the video, you can understand how much information is collected or hypothesized about you using their platform and services. In turn, this allows Twitter to make targeted advertisements based on geolocation, gender, language, and age. Further demographics can target your device, like your make and model, the carrier, if you're a new mobile user, and even if you're a Wi-Fi only user. Audience targeting can be used to create conversation, event attendance, tweet engagements, and you can really focus on keywords, movies, TV shows, and specific interests or specific followers. Twitter uses shared information from ad partners and affiliates, specifically cookies and device IDs. Being that the typical user doesn't use APIs, we're going to go ahead and skip over section 2.7 as that section is mainly in use for developers, but do keep in mind they still do log some information when accessing the developer portal, like your login ID and stuff like that. Section 2.8 references other third parties and affiliates. These are not ad partners, but rather the services you might connect Twitter to. For example, Twitter can integrate with the Twitch live streaming platform, in which Twitch can perform a tweet for the user when they start their live stream. This section just states that the users have the ability to revoke this access at any time from the application settings. In section 2.9, Twitter explains further collection through inferred identity. What this means is if you've logged into Twitter on a browser once and then you logged out, the next time you visit Twitter, even when logged out, they are associating your browser with the last account logged in. Unfortunately, this is common practice in free services and other social media platforms. This section also explains how a user can visit websites about sports on their cellular device, like I was saying earlier, but still receive advertisements and recommendations on their laptop about sports in quick succession afterwards. The last section of this element of the privacy policy is section 2.10, and it explains how a user may opt into certain personalization and data settings. Within this section, a user can learn how to disable interest-based advertisements, both on the platform and off. Users may also disable precise location and opt out of inferred identity personalization. In the latter half of this section, users can also view the data collected by advertisers and other inferred information. Thereafter, users are able to remove certain interests and audiences they've been associated through these advertisers. The next element, I'd like to call it section 3, is about information that Twitter shares and discloses. I'll briefly go over the minor sections because they are important, but this will sound repetitive if you've been listening along so far. The first minor section, 3.1, mentions that when a user authorizes a third-party client or application, that their personal data will be shared with that client in order to use their service. Section 3.2 just lightly touches on Twitter's engagement with their service providers like Visa or MasterCard, or even Google Analytics, so that they are able to understand website flow and traffic patterns. This section basically covers Twitter's back if the service provider falls flat on their end of the deal. Think of a scenario where a fraudulent credit card is used through Twitter's advertising platform. And basically what this section does is it allows Twitter to not be at fault if the charge goes through, and then later a chargeback is instated. The next section, section 3.3, lets users know that information can be removed from their website on Twitter's behalf if they deem it harmful to public interest, or if the company needs to comply with local laws and regulations. This includes, government requests and legal processes as well. You can observe this section being leveraged more recently with the ban and subsequent removal of former U.S. President Donald Trump's account in early January 2021. This action was performed because Twitter viewed his recent activities on their platform as a risk of further incitement of violence, and under their privacy policy, it falls right into place. Section 3.4 is just a safeguard for Twitter in the event that the company is merged, acquired, reorganized, sold, or bankrupt. And that basically when that happens, personal data may be sold or transferred as part of that transaction. In section 3.5, the privacy policy mentions that non-personal information is made public. This includes tweet engagements, demographics, link clicks, topics, per geolocation. So top trending topics in New York City, top trending topics in Miami, California, whatever you have there, and also votes in polls. This is just aggregate data and doesn't apply to any direct user, but rather all users in general to just understand trending topics, basically. The final element in Twitter's privacy policy kind of explains how to manage your personal data on Twitter. It's quite important that users understand the rights to their data and what they can do to access, adjust, or delete information gathered or given to the platform. Some important notes in this section is that log data is kept for a maximum of 18 months, and users may delete their account. When users delete their account is essentially put into like a purgatory for about 30 days, and then it's finally deleted. This is just in place so that if a user is accidentally deleted or wrongfully deleted, they're able to restore their account within 30 days. Now that we covered, pretty much all the details about a privacy policy, you can understand why it's important to know what you're signing up for. The Twitter platform is meant to spread information shared on their platform to millions of people, but at what cost to one's personal data does it require? An article in 2020 by PCMag mentions the cost of personal data, and quite frankly, it's incredibly cheap for the amount of profit a company can gain from it. Just take a look at these graphs here provided by PCMag to understand what I'm kind of talking about there. But anyways, thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something today, and I'm really hoping that you'll be more informed on future services you might sign up for.